husband carried his mother out of our house right in the middle of the party. 38 people froze with their glasses in their hands. Someone dropped a fork. The sound of metal hitting porcelain was as loud as a grenade exploding. But it didn't happen right away. 7 days earlier, I stood in our kitchen and listened as the woman who gave birth to my husband called me a servant. My name is Emily. I am 32 years old. I work as an accountant for a small company. I am the mother of 5-year-old Lily, and I have been married to James for 8 years. We live in a 2-story house on the outskirts of town. We have a garden, an old dog named Max, and a mortgage that we will pay off in 12 years. An ordinary life, an ordinary family. I always thought we were happy. The morning began as usual. It was Monday, mid-March. I was making breakfast, Lily was packing her backpack, James was drinking coffee and scrolling through the news on his phone. The smell of eggs and bacon mingled with the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. The morning sun streamed through the window, painting streaks of light on the wooden floor. A normal Monday morning. The doorbell rang at 8:15. I remember exactly because I looked at the clock above the stove and thought, who could it be so early? James opened the door. His mother, Margaret, entered the house. 70 years old, severe hairstyle, expensive coat, the smell of perfume that was always too strong for the morning. She didn't say hello. She walked past me into the living room, took off her coat, hung it on the back of a chair, and said, "Jamie, pour me some tea." James poured it. I continued cooking. Lily came out of her room, hugged her grandmother, received a dry nod instead of a hug, and returned to the table. We ate breakfast in silence. Margaret sat in the living room, drinking tea, leafing through the magazine she had brought with her. She didn't explain anything. She was just there, as if it were her home, as if we were supposed to be waiting for her. When James left for work and I was about to take Lily to school, Margaret stood up and said, "Emily, we need to talk." I stopped in the hallway. Lily was waiting in the car. "We'll talk tonight. I'm late." "No, now." Her voice brooked no argument. I went back to the kitchen. Margaret was standing at the stove looking at the dirty pan, the crumbs on the table, the coffee stain I hadn't had time to wipe up. She ran her finger across the countertop, looked at me and said, "This house is a mess. My son deserves better." I clutched the handle of my bag. "Excuse me?" "You heard what I said. I walk in here and see chaos. Dirty dishes, dust on the shelves, stale food in the refrigerator. Is this a house or a dormitory? James works all day to provide for this family, and you can't even maintain basic cleanliness." Every word was like a blow. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Margaret continued, "You're a servant in someone else's house, Emily. My son married you for love, but love fades. What remains is everyday life. And if you can't handle everyday life, what good are you?" I could hear my own heart beating. Servant. She called me a servant. In my own house. In the house where I did the laundry, cooked, cleaned, raised a child, worked full days, and fell asleep every night thinking about how much more I had to do tomorrow. I didn't answer. I just turned around and left. I got in the car, drove Lily to school, kissed her goodbye, and went to work. All day I sat at the computer and counted numbers, and one word kept spinning in my head. Servant. James came home at 8 in the evening. I set the table and we had dinner. I told him what his mother had said. He listened, chewed, nodded. When I finished, he wiped his mouth with a napkin, looked at me and said, "Mom is just worried about me. Don't take it to heart." Don't take it to heart. I stood at the sink washing the dishes, tears dripping into the soapy water. James went into his study. The door closed. The house fell silent. I heard the sound of a spoon falling. It was my spoon. I had dropped it in the sink and it clinked and clanked and clanked. On the third day, she started telling my 5-year-old daughter that I was a bad mother. Lily hid behind my back and whispered, "Mommy, why does Grandma say that?" Margaret came every day. No call, no warning. She just showed up at 10 in the morning when I was at work, and Lily was at school. James had given her the keys 3 years ago in case of an emergency. Now she used them as if they were her own. I first realized this when I came home on Wednesday. The house smelled of unfamiliar perfume. The furniture in the living room had been rearranged. The sofa had been moved closer to the window. The armchair had been turned around. The coffee table had been moved half a meter to the left. I stood in the doorway and didn't recognize my living room. Margaret was sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea from my favorite cup, the one with blue flowers that my mother gave me for my birthday. I saw that cup in her hands and felt something tighten inside me. "What are you doing?" "Tidying up. You won't have time." She took a sip and put the cup on the table without a coaster. A wet ring remained on the wooden surface. I rearranged the furniture to let more light into the room. Your arrangement was illogical. And I threw out the food from the refrigerator. There was so much unhealthy stuff in there. Jamie shouldn't eat that. I opened the refrigerator. It was empty. Lily's yogurt, the cheese I bought 2 days ago, the vegetables, the fruit, all gone. Only the food Margaret brought was left. Her food, her choices, in my refrigerator. I closed the door. "You can't just come in and throw our things away." "I can. I'm his mother. I take care of him. Unlike you." She got up, went to the sink, washed the cup, dried it with a towel, and put it in the cupboard. In its place. Not where I always kept it. In its own place. The next morning, I woke up at 6 to put everything back the way it was. I moved the furniture back. I bought new groceries. I hid his favorite cup in the far corner of the cupboard where Margaret wouldn't find it. I thought that was the end of it. But on Friday, something happened that crossed all boundaries. I came home from work at 5 in the evening. Lily was sitting on the floor in her room, crying. Quietly, holding back her sobs so no one would hear. I sat down next to her and hugged her. "What's wrong, sweetie?" She pressed herself against me, burying her face in my shoulder. "Grandma Margaret said you don't dress me right, that my dresses are ugly, that the other kids laugh at me. She said Dad made a bad choice in wives." "What does that mean, Mom?" I froze. 5 years old. My daughter was 5 years old. She was learning to tie her shoelaces, counting to 100, believing in the tooth fairy. And now she was sitting on the floor of her room asking me what a bad choice meant. "Where's Grandma?" "In the kitchen. She said I had to sit here until I understood how to behave." I got up. I took Lily by the hand. We went downstairs. Margaret was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. I brought my daughter to me and hugged her shoulders. "What did you tell her?" Margaret turned and looked at us. "The truth. Children should know the truth." I saw what she was wearing this morning. Ripped jeans, an old t-shirt. That's unacceptable. A girl should look decent. Those are her favorite clothes. I picked them out myself. Exactly. You picked them out. You, who has no idea about taste and propriety. Look at yourself, Emily. You wear cheap clothes. You don't take care of yourself. You don't know how to keep a house. And you're raising my granddaughter? She deserves a better example. Lily pressed herself closer to me. I could feel her shoulders shaking. "Get out of my house. Right now." Margaret smiled. Smiled. "This isn't your house, dear. It's my son's house. I have every right to be here. And if you don't like it, you can talk to James. Let's see who he chooses." She picked up her bag, put on her coat, and left. The door closed quietly, gently. Lily burst into tears in my arms. I stood in the hallway, stroking her head and thinking, where is my husband? Why isn't he here? Why am I alone? James came home at 9 o'clock. I put Lily to bed, sat down on the sofa, and told him everything. Every word, every detail. He listened, looked at the floor, rubbed his temples. When I finished, he sighed. Mom can be harsh, but she doesn't mean any harm. She's just used to being in control. Give her time, she'll calm down. James, she made Lily cry. She told our daughter that I was a bad choice. Don't overreact, Em. Mom just wants to help. I got up and went to the bedroom. I lay down on the bed and covered my head with a blanket. I listened to James walking around the house, closing doors, turning off lights. Then he lay down next to me. Silence. Darkness. And for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I thought about divorce. I cooked for 3 days straight. I slept 4 hours a night. And an hour before the guests arrived, she came in with a pot of borscht and said, "Put away your cooking. People should eat normal food." Our anniversary was in a week. 8 years. I was planning a quiet dinner at home. James and I, maybe inviting a couple of close friends, ordering pizza, opening wine, sitting in the garden under the stars. Nothing complicated, nothing expensive. Just an evening for us. But Margaret found out about it. I don't know how. Either James told her or she overheard our conversation when she showed up unannounced yet again. On Tuesday, she called me at work. "Emily, I hear you're celebrating your anniversary at home." That's not right. 8 years of marriage is a milestone. It calls for a real celebration. "Margaret, we want to spend the evening together. Just the two of you?" No, no, no. I've already invited the relatives. Aunt Susan, Uncle Robert, cousins, their children. 26 people in all. Everyone will be there on Saturday at 7 in the evening. Try to be ready. She hung up. I sat at my desk in the office, staring at the phone. 26 people. She invited 26 people to my house without asking me. I dialed James's number. "Hello? Your mother invited 26 people to our anniversary party." She didn't ask me. Silence on the line. Then a sigh. "Mom just wants to make the party nice." "Don't make a scene, Em. She means well." "James, it's our anniversary. Ours. And now it's going to be a party for your relatives. We have to welcome them, their family. Let's not argue, okay?" "I'm busy." He hung up. I sat there in the empty office. It was raining outside. A nasty little March rain. I watched the raindrops run down the window and thought, when did I stop mattering in my own life? On Wednesday, I started getting ready. I made a menu. Chicken, potatoes, salads, appetizers, dessert. For 26 people plus us. I calculated the budget. $400 for food. Another $100 for disposable tableware, because we didn't have enough plates and cutlery. I withdrew money from our joint account and went to the supermarket. For 3 hours, I walked the aisles, choosing, counting, packing. The cart was filled to the brim. At the checkout, the girl looked at everything and said, "Are you having a party?" "An anniversary," I replied. She smiled. "Congratulations." I smiled back, but inside I felt empty. I spent the next 3 days cooking. I got up at 5 in the morning and managed to bake, marinate, and chop something before work. In the evening, I came home and continued. Lily sat next to me, drawing, sometimes helping to mix the salad. James appeared late, tired and silent. He glanced into the kitchen, nodded, and went to his study. On Friday evening, I finished. The refrigerator was filled with containers of food. On the table was a list of what to reheat, what to put out, and in what order. My hands ached from constantly working with a knife. My back ached. My eyes were heavy. I went to bed at 10 o'clock in the evening and fell asleep in a second. On Saturday morning, I woke up at 7. I had a whole day of preparation ahead of me. I had to clean the house, set the table, get dressed, and get myself ready. I made a schedule. Everything had to be ready by 6 in the evening. At 2 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Margaret was standing on the doorstep with a huge pot in her hands. She was wearing a festive dress, her hair was done, and she was wearing makeup. She looked like she was going to her own party. I came to help. I took the pot into the kitchen and put it on the stove. I brought borscht. Real, homemade borscht. Your guests will appreciate it. "Margaret, I've already got everything ready. The menu is planned. I saw your menu. Chicken, potatoes, salads. Boring. People are expecting something special." She opened the refrigerator and started taking out containers. "What are you doing?" "Making room for real food." I watched as she took out my dishes, the ones I had spent 3 days preparing. She put them on the table. She looked at them with contempt. "This can be thrown away." "We'll keep this, but it needs to be redone." "The chicken is overcooked." "See?" She didn't even taste it, she just looked at it. My kitchen turned into a war zone. Margaret gave orders, commanded, criticized. I stood in the corner, holding onto the countertop, feeling everything inside me tighten into a tight knot. At 6 in the evening, the guests began to arrive. 26 people, just as Margaret had promised. Plus 12 more that she had invited without telling me. 38 people filled our house. The living room, the dining room, the kitchen. People, laughter, conversation, music everywhere. I stood at the entrance, smiling, accepting congratulations. Someone handed me a gift. Someone asked where to hang their coat. Someone asked to see the bathroom. I was the hostess at my own anniversary party, which I hadn't planned. James came out of his study at 6:30. He had changed his clothes, shaved, and was smiling. He came over, put his arm around my waist, and kissed me on the cheek. "Happy anniversary, Em." I looked at him and said nothing. I just nodded and went to the kitchen to set the table. She stood up with a glass in her hand and made a toast. 38 people listened as she methodically trampled me, hiding behind a smile and words about family values. Everyone sat down at the table at 7:30. The long table in the living room that James and I bought a year ago specifically for large family dinners. It had never been used to its full capacity. Today, there weren't enough seats. People sat in the kitchen, on the couches. Some stood. James sat at the head of the table. I sat next to him. Margaret sat at the other end, the center of attention, as always. She smiled, joked with relatives, and accepted compliments about the borscht, which stood in the center of the table in a beautiful tureen. When everyone had filled their plates, Margaret stood up. She tapped her knife on her glass. The sound made everyone fall silent and look at her. Attention. Attention. I want to say a few words on the occasion of my son's anniversary. James smiled. I clutched my napkin under the table. Margaret raised her glass. 8 years ago, my Jamie got married. He chose a girl for love, and I, of course, supported his choice. After all, a mother's love is unconditional. We accept our children's decisions even if they don't always meet our expectations. The first jab. Quiet, veiled, but everyone understood. Several people exchanged glances. James continued to smile, unaware of the subtext. Over the years, I have watched this family grow. James works tirelessly, provides for his family, and cares for his loved ones. He is a real man, a real pillar of strength, and I am proud of him. Some people are lucky to be born into good families, with the right values and an understanding of duty. James is one of those people. The second jab. She emphasized the word some. She looked at me. Everyone looked at me. I felt my cheeks burning. Of course, marriage is not just about who earns money. It's also about who creates comfort, who cooks, who keeps things tidy. A real wife should be able to cook so that her husband comes home with pleasure. She should take care of the house so that it is a place where people want to be. She should raise children so that they grow up to be decent people. The third jab. She didn't mention my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Aunt Susan lowered her eyes. Uncle Robert coughed. Cousin Jessica stared at her plate. It's a shame that some people don't appreciate how lucky they are to be part of a decent family. It's a shame that some people think love is enough and forget about their responsibilities. But we believe in Jamie. He's strong. He'll get through this. He always does. To my son. Everyone raised their glasses. To James. I raised mine too. I took a sip of wine. It was sour and burned my throat. Margaret sat down, satisfied, triumphant. The conversation resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had seen it. James turned to me and whispered, "Don't worry about it. Mom's just nervous." I nodded. What else could I say? 38 people were sitting in my house eating my food and her borscht, celebrating my anniversary, and they had just witnessed me being publicly humiliated. The next hour passed in a blur. I got up, cleared plates, brought dessert, poured coffee. Margaret gave orders. Emily, bring the napkins. Emily, clear that away. Emily, pass the salt. She didn't use my name, just pointed her finger and said, "You, that woman." I became invisible servants at my own anniversary party. I walked back and forth between the kitchen and the living room, carried out orders, smiled when necessary, and felt something hot and dangerous growing inside me. At 9 o'clock in the evening, someone suggested singing. They got out a guitar and started singing. Lily came down from her room, knelt down next to James, and listened. Margaret told stories from her son's childhood. Everyone laughed. It felt like I was watching this scene from the outside, through thick glass. I could hear the sounds, but I couldn't make out the words. At 10 o'clock, I gathered the dirty dishes and took them to the kitchen. There was a mountain of plates, cups, and cutlery. The sink was overflowing. I turned on the water and started washing. My hands were shaking. A plate slipped, fell, and broke into 3 pieces. I looked at the shards and felt tears welling up. "Emily," Margaret's voice came from the living room. "Emily, where's the coffee?" I said, "Bring the coffee." I dried my hands, picked up the coffee pot, and carried it to the living room. Margaret was sitting in an armchair, surrounded by guests, like a queen on her throne. "Are you deaf? I've been calling you for 5 minutes. Bring the cups. The normal ones, not the cheap ones you usually use." Something inside me snapped. "Margaret, I'm tired. Maybe someone else can help." She looked at me as if I had said something indecent. "Tired? You? What are you tired of, I wonder? Of living in this house for 8 years with everything done for you?" James works 60 hours a week. He's the one who has a right to be tired. You're just a housekeeper my son supports. And even that isn't enough for you. Silence. Absolute silence. 38 people fell silent. Some froze with their forks halfway to their mouths. Some stopped chewing. Even the music stopped because the man with the guitar forgot to play. A housekeeper supported by my son. The phrase hung in the air. I stood with the coffee pot in my hands and looked at James. He looked at his plate. He was silent. I put the coffee pot on the table. I turned around. I went to the kitchen. I heard laughter behind me. Nervous, awkward, but laughter nonetheless. Someone made a joke, trying to lighten the mood. The conversations resumed. I stood over the sink, holding onto the edge. The water continued to run. The pieces of the plate lay at the bottom. And suddenly the laughter behind the wall stopped. Abruptly, as if someone had cut the wire. Complete silence. I turned around. I was standing in the kitchen, holding on to the edge of the sink, when the laughter in the living room stopped so abruptly, as if someone had cut the wire. I turned around. My husband was standing there. James got up from the table. Slowly, deliberately. The chair slid back, scraping across the parquet floor. The sound pierced the silence, causing everyone to freeze. 38 pairs of eyes turned to him. He stood with his arms at his sides, his back straight, his gaze fixed on his mother. I couldn't see his face, but I could see the faces of the others. They looked at him and understood. Something had changed. The atmosphere in the room thickened, became heavy, almost physically palpable. Margaret sat in her chair holding a cup of coffee. She was still smiling, but her smile had become uncertain. Something about her son's posture alarmed her. "Jamie, sit down. Let's continue with the evening. We haven't had cake yet." He didn't sit down. He continued to stand, to watch, to remain silent. I walked into the living room. Everyone looked at me, then back at James. He stood in the center of the room, between the table and his mother's chair. And for the first time in 8 years, I really saw him. Not the husband who avoids conflict, not the son who is afraid of disappointing his mother, the man who had made a decision. His jaw was clenched. His hands were clenched into fists, not out of aggression, but out of restrained tension. He was breathing deeply and evenly, like a man gathering his strength before a leap. In his eyes was something I had never seen before: complete, icy determination. Margaret set her cup on the saucer. The sound of porcelain. "Jamie, what's wrong with you?" "You're acting strange. The guests are waiting." She tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. Not sharply, but clearly. That stopped her. Cousin Jessica whispered something to her husband. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Aunt Susan nervously fiddled with her napkin. Lily sat on the sofa, hugging her stuffed animal, and stared at her father with wide eyes. Time dragged on. 1 second. 2. 5. 10. James was silent, but his silence was louder than any words. It filled the room, weighed on everyone present, and made them nervous. Margaret tried again. "Are you all right, dear? Are you feeling sick? Why don't you sit down and I'll get you some water?" She started to get up, but James raised his hand. The gesture was simple, but everyone understood. "Don't come near me." When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. So quiet that everyone in the room instinctively leaned forward to hear. "Get up. Pack your things. Now." Margaret froze. "What?" I said, "Get up. Pack your things. And get out of my house." For a second, no one breathed. Then Margaret laughed. Nervously, shrilly. "Jamie, don't be ridiculous. What kind of joke is this?" "We're at a party. Let's not ruin the evening. This is no joke. Get out. Now." The smile disappeared from her face. She looked at her son, then at me, then back at him. "Are you serious? Because of her? Because of that?" "I'm not going to finish that sentence, Mom. Get up. Pack your things. You have 30 seconds. Margaret tried to address the guests. "Do you see what he's doing? He's kicking his mother out. His own mother, who gave birth to him, raised him, devoted her whole life to him." No one answered. Everyone looked at their plates, their cups, the walls. Anywhere but at her. James didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there and waited. His presence was absolute, unshakable. I could see how tense his shoulders were, how clenched his jaw was, how the vein in his neck was throbbing. But his voice remained steady. "Mom, are you going to do this yourself? Or do I have to help you?" "Help? How dare you? I'm your mother. You can't talk to me like that." 30 seconds passed. James took a step forward. Margaret recoiled, pressing herself against the back of the chair. "What are you doing? James, stop. Stop right now." He kept walking, calmly, purposefully. It wasn't aggression. It was something much stronger. Absolute, unshakable determination. When he reached the chair, Margaret tried to stand up, to move away, but he was faster. He bent down, grabbed her under the knees and back, and lifted her into his arms. Literally. The 70-year-old woman was in the air, in the arms of her own son. "Put me down. Immediately. Put me down." She pounded his chest with her fists, trying to break free, but James held her tight. Not roughly, but securely. He turned and walked toward the exit, carrying his mother in his arms. 38 people watched as he walked past the table, past the sofa, past Lily's toys scattered on the floor, past the photos on the wall where he and Margaret smiled in happier times. Each step he took was confident. The parquet floor creaked under his weight. James's breathing was steady, despite the strain. Margaret screamed, "I'm your mother. How dare you? You'll regret this. I'll never forgive you." But her voice grew weaker as they moved away, closer to the front door. No one stood up. No one intervened. The guests sat like statues. Some covered their mouths with their hands. Some lowered their eyes. Margaret's sister, Aunt Susan, sat white as a sheet, clutching a napkin so tightly that her knuckles turned white. James reached the door. He stopped. It was impossible to open the door with his mother in his arms. He looked at me. I was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. Our eyes met. I saw an apology in his eyes, belated, but sincere. I walked over. I opened the door. The cold March air rushed into the house. James carried his mother out onto the porch. He set her down gently without jerking her. Margaret swayed and grabbed the railing. Her face was red, her eyes full of tears, rage, and shock. James stood in the doorway. He looked down at her. "When you're ready to apologize, call me. Until then, don't come here. This is my house, mine, and no one will humiliate my wife here." He went back inside. I closed the door. The lock clicked. Silence. We stood in the hallway listening to Margaret shouting something incoherent behind the door, then the click of heels, receding footsteps, the slam of a car door, the sound of an engine starting. James didn't move. He stood with his back to the door, looking into the living room where 38 people stood frozen. His chest heaved heavily. His hands were still clenched into fists, but his face was determined. The very determination I had lacked all these years. He took a step forward, returned to the living room. Everyone looked at him. He looked at each of them in turn. Then he spoke. He lifted his mother into his arms, a 70-year-old woman. She struggled, screamed, demanded to be put down. He carried her to the exit, and 38 people couldn't say a word. James stood in the middle of the living room. Everyone looked at him. He looked at each of them in turn. His gaze lingered on the faces of relatives, family friends, people who had just witnessed him carry his own mother out of the house. Aunt Susan was the first to speak. "James, I understand you're upset, but she's your mother. Maybe you should have—" He raised his hand to stop her. "Number—" "I'm sorry, Aunt Susan, but no." She didn't finish her sentence. She lowered her gaze. James took a deep breath. His hands were still shaking, the adrenaline still pumping. But his voice was steady and confident. "I want to say a few words. You are all here in my house, and you deserve an explanation." He turned and looked at me. I was standing against the wall, leaning on the doorframe because my legs wouldn't hold me. Our eyes met. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in 8 years. Absolute confidence in his choice. "My wife," he began, and everyone looked at me. "My wife," he said, "is the woman who has kept our home together for 8 years. She gets up at 6 in the morning, makes breakfast for our daughter, drives her to school, works a full day, comes home, makes dinner, checks her homework, puts Lily to bed, and only then sits down to rest. If she has time." He paused. Someone coughed. Someone shifted in their chair. She never asked me for anything except respect. Not money, not gifts, not the attention that I often forgot to give her. Just respect. And I didn't even give her that. His voice became quieter but harder. Over the last few months, I watched my mother systematically humiliate my wife. Right in front of me, in my house, with my silent consent. I told myself that it was a family matter, that my mother was just restless, that I had to be patient. I was deceiving myself. Uncle Robert tried to intervene. "James, family is complicated. Sometimes you have to compromise." It wasn't a compromise. It was surrender. I surrendered to my mother and betrayed my wife. The silence grew thicker. James continued. "Today, on our anniversary, my mother called my wife a housekeeper, in front of 38 witnesses. She said that Emily was worthless, that I was supporting her, that she was a nobody. And I sat there and said nothing, just as I had said nothing all these months." He turned to the guests. "If any of you think my mother was right, if any of you think you have the right to come into this house and humiliate my wife, there's the door. He pointed to the exit. Right now. You can leave. I won't be offended. But if you stay, you show respect for Emily, to the mistress of this house, to the mother of my child, to the woman to whom I owe everything. No one got up. Everyone sat there, digesting what they had heard. Cousin Jessica was the first to speak. James, we didn't know it was that serious. Margaret has always been domineering, but we thought you were handling it. I'm sorry. Her husband nodded. I'm sorry, Emily. One by one, the guests began to apologize. Quietly, awkwardly, but sincerely. I'm sorry. We should have said something. We saw it, but we didn't intervene. Forgive us. I stood and listened. The words reached me as if through cotton wool. Everything seemed unreal. James, my husband, who had avoided conflict for 8 years, had just carried his mother out of the house and made a speech that changed everything. Aunt Susan stood up. She came over to me. She hugged me. I froze, not knowing how to react. Forgive my sister, Emily. Margaret has always been a difficult person, but that's no excuse. What she did is unforgivable. Thank you for putting up with her for so long, but you don't have to anymore. She walked away, wiping her eyes. The other guests began to gather their things, quietly, carefully, trying not to make too much noise. They apologized on their way out. They thanked us for the evening. They wished us happiness. 20 minutes later, the house was empty. The 3 of us remained. Me, James, and Lily, who was still sitting on the sofa, hugging her toy. She looked at her father with wide eyes. Is Daddy good? James came over and crouched down in front of his daughter. He took her hands in his. Daddy is sorry, sweetheart. To Mommy and to you. I should have protected you sooner. But now I have. And no one will hurt you anymore. I promise. Lily hugged him, tightly with childlike trust. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. Very, very much. He got up, picked Lily up, and carried her to her room. I could hear him reading her a bedtime story. His voice was tired but calm. Lily fell asleep to his voice, protected, loved. I stood in the living room amid the remnants of the party. Dirty plates, half-empty glasses, napkins scattered across the table. I should have started cleaning up. But I couldn't move. I just stood there and looked at it all, as if it were the scenery of someone else's life. James came downstairs 15 minutes later. Lily was asleep. We were alone. For the first time all evening, just the 2 of us. He walked over and stopped a step away from me. I looked at him. I waited. When he returned to the house, the guests expected him to explain, apologize, smooth things over somehow. Instead, he said 23 words that changed everything. We stood in the living room amid the chaos, dirty plates piled high on the table, the smell of food, perfume, coffee. Silence that rang in my ears after hours of noise and conversation. James looked at me. I looked at him. Between us were 8 years of marriage, thousands of days, tens of thousands of words. And now none of them seemed appropriate. I'm sorry, he finally said. 2 syllables, 1 word. Not enough to cover months of humiliation. But it was a start. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to accuse, to spill out everything that had been building up inside. Another part was too tired even for anger. I just stood there and waited for him to say more. James ran his hand over his face, a gesture of exhaustion, of despair. I saw everything, Em. Every insult, every jab, every time Mom crossed the line. I saw you shrink, withdraw, the light go out in your eyes. And I did nothing. Why? My voice sounded strange, hoarse, tired. Why did you stay silent? He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Because she's my mother. Because I didn't know how to stand up to her. Because I was afraid of destroying the family. Stupid excuses. but they were all I had. He raised his head and looked at me. There were tears in his eyes. For the first time in 8 years, I saw my husband cry. My father put up with her for 25 years, Em. For 25 years, he kept quiet when she humiliated him. She controlled his every move. She decided what he ate, what he wore, who he socialized with. He became a shadow. And then he died of a heart attack at 52. He wiped his eyes. His last words were in the hospital. I sat next to him, holding his hand. He looked at me and said, "Don't repeat my mistakes. Protect those you love, even from your family, especially from your family." I didn't know about this. James never talked about his father's last moments. I thought it was peaceful, quiet. It turns out it was a warning. I promised him, James continued. Right there in the hospital room, I promised I wouldn't become like him, that I would be stronger, that I would protect my family. And what did I do? I repeated his path, word for word. He stood up and came closer. I saw fear in his eyes, fear that I wouldn't forgive him, that it was too late. Today, when I saw your hands shaking over the sink, when I heard Mom call you a housekeeper, something clicked. I saw myself from the outside. I saw my father. I saw that I had become exactly what I feared becoming. And I realized that either I act right now, or I lose you. I lose us. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. He just stood there and cried like a child who was hurt and scared. I'm sorry, Em. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. I'm sorry I let her poison our lives for so long. I'm sorry you were alone in this fight for 8 years. I was silent. I couldn't speak because if I opened my mouth, I would start crying myself. And I had cried enough. For months. In the shower, in the kitchen, in the car on the way to work. I was tired of crying. James took a step toward me. Then another. He stopped a centimeter away. I chose you, Em. Today, in front of everyone, I chose you. And I will choose you every day. I promise. I looked at him, at the man I married 8 years ago. Back then, he was different. Cheerful, easygoing, full of energy. Years of pressure from his mother had changed him, made him quieter, more cautious, more withdrawn. But today I saw a glimpse of the old James, the one who could make decisions, who could protect. What now? My voice was quiet. What are we going to do about your mother? He exhaled. Nothing. Until she apologizes to you. Publicly, sincerely, without excuses. Until then, no contact, no calls, no visits, nothing. What if she doesn't apologize? Then she has made her choice, and we will have to live without her in our lives. It was radical, harsh, but necessary. I knew Margaret wouldn't apologize easily, if she apologized at all. Her pride, her certainty that she was right, would not allow her to admit her mistake, especially to someone she considered unworthy of her son. Okay, I said. That's all. Just one word. But James understood. He saw agreement, acceptance, a willingness to try again. He hugged me, tightly, desperately, like a man who had almost lost the most important thing. I love you. I always have. I just forgot how to show it. We stood there for a long time. A minute, 2, 5. Gradually, the tension eased. Our breathing evened out. Our hearts calmed down. The house around us was quiet. Lily was asleep upstairs. The guests had left. Margaret had gone. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. A real, peaceful quiet. Let's clean up, James said. Together. We began to collect plates, throw away leftovers, wash dishes. We worked side by side, silently, in sync. Like a team. Like partners. Like it should have been from the beginning. By midnight, the kitchen was clean. The living room was tidy. The trash was taken out. We went upstairs and looked in on Lily. She was sleeping with her arms outstretched and a smile on her face. Serene, protected. James covered her with a blanket and kissed her forehead. I stood in the doorway and thought, maybe we can do this. Maybe this is a new beginning. My husband was crying. In 8 years, I had seen him sad, tired, angry, but never crying. He said, I was afraid of becoming my father. Today I realized that I already have. We sat on the bed. It was 2 a.m. The house was asleep. Only we were awake, too wound up to sleep after everything that had happened. I hugged my knees and looked out the window. James sat next to me, his back against the headboard. Tell me about your father, I asked. Really tell me. Not the stories you tell at parties. The truth. James was silent for a minute. Then he began to speak. Quietly, slowly, as if each word caused him pain. My father was a good man. Kind, patient, loving. He worked as an engineer, loved to read, collected model ships. He had dreams, plans, desires. And my mother methodically destroyed every one of them. How? I wanted to understand. I wanted to see the parallels with our lives. She controlled everything. What he ate, what he wore, who he talked to. If Dad wanted to meet up with friends, Mom would make a scene. She would say that he was selfish, that he only thought about himself, that family should come first. By family, she meant herself. James rubbed his face. Dad wanted to start his own business, a small electronics repair shop. He had savings, a plan, everything figured out. Mom said it was crazy, that we would lose everything, that he only thought about himself. Dad gave up. He put the money back in the bank. He never mentioned the workshop again. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. I remembered all the times I wanted to change something in our lives. Go on vacation without my mother-in-law, redo the living room, sign Lily up for dance lessons. Every time, Margaret found reasons why it was a bad idea, and James agreed with her. He saw it all, James continued. He saw me repeating his mistakes. But he didn't say it directly. He only hinted at it. Jamie, are you happy? Jamie, how are things with Emily? Jamie, remember when I talked about boundaries? Tears welled up in his eyes again. In the last year before his death, Dad started to change. He became tougher with Mom. He said no. He insisted on his way. Mom didn't understand what was going on. She got angry and made a scene. Dad held his ground. But it was too late. 25 years of stress had taken their toll. What happened? A heart attack. At work. He was 52 years old. The doctor said it was chronic stress and high blood pressure, which he had ignored for years. Mom blamed his job, his workload, everything except herself. James turned to me. In the hospital, in those last moments, Dad was lucid. No panic, no fear. He held my hand and spoke calmly, as if giving instructions on how to assemble furniture. Jamie, listen carefully. You have a good wife. Take care of her. Protect her. Even from me. Even from his mother. Especially from her. I said I understood, but I didn't. Not really. I thought Dad was exaggerating, that they just didn't get along, that it would be different with Emily. James smiled bitterly. How wrong I was. We sat in silence. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside the window, the occasional car drove down the night street. The whole world was asleep, and we were sorting through the wreckage of our marriage, trying to figure out if anything could be put back together. I was afraid, Em, James admitted. I was afraid that if I opposed my mother, she would break up with me. That I would be left alone. That you would leave, Lily would be left without a family. That everything would fall apart. So I kept quiet. I hoped that somehow it would all work itself out. Nothing works itself out, I said. Problems only get bigger when you ignore them. I know. I know that now. What changed today? Why did you decide to act today? James looked at his hands. When my mother called you a housekeeper and you went into the kitchen, I heard laughter. The guests were laughing, trying to lighten the mood, and I suddenly saw how it looked from the outside. My wife was publicly humiliated, and everyone pretended nothing had happened. They continued to eat, drink, and have fun. He clenched his fists. Then the laughter died down. And I realized that if I didn't get up now, right now, I would never get up. That this was a moment of choice. Either I continue to be my mother's son, or I become my wife's husband. There is no third option. He looked at me. And I chose you. Without doubt, without hesitation. I chose you, and I will choose you again and again, as many times as necessary. I reached out and took his hand in mine. Warm, large, familiar. Thank you. For finally seeing. For taking action. For choosing us. We lay down on the bed. James hugged me, and I pressed myself against him. I could feel his heart beating. Steady. Strong. I could hear him breathing. Deep. Calm. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Not alone. Not abandoned. Protected. We'll get through this, he whispered in the dark. I promise you we'll get through this. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I had to believe him, because without faith, there was no point in trying. His mother hung up the phone. Then his aunt, uncle, and cousins called. They all said the same thing. How could you? He replied to each of them. Very easily. Sunday morning began with a phone call. 7 o'clock. I was still asleep, exhausted from the previous day. James picked up the phone and left the bedroom so as not to wake me. But I woke up at the sound of his voice. Calm. Firm. No, Mom. I haven't changed my mind. I went downstairs. James was standing by the window in the living room, the phone to his ear. He listened without interrupting. Margaret spoke at length. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone of her voice. High-pitched, agitated, demanding. Finally, James spoke. Mom, I'll call you this afternoon. We'll talk calmly. You're too emotional right now. No, I'm not coming to you. You come here if you want to apologize? Yes, that's right. Apologize. To Emily, publicly. Pause. Then Margaret screamed something, so loud that I could hear it from across the room. James moved the phone away from his ear and waited for her to finish. When everything quieted down, he said calmly, I'll call at 2 o'clock. Think about it until then. And he hung up. He turned around and saw me. Good morning, did you hear that? Part of it, I nodded. How is she? Angry. Hurt. She thinks she's a victim. Typical reaction. The three of us had breakfast together. Lily was unusually quiet. She ate her cereal and glanced at us. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. Grandma won't be coming back? James put down his coffee. She will, sweetie. But only if she apologizes and behaves herself. Like at school. There are rules. If you break them, there are consequences. Lily nodded. She hurt Mom. That's not good. Yes, that's very bad. And Dad should have protected Mom earlier. But now Daddy will. Always. Lily smiled. Okay, I like it when you're together. At 2 o'clock, James called his mother. He put it on speaker so I could hear. Margaret picked up on the second ring. Jamie, have you come to your senses? No, Mom. You need to come to your senses. Silence. Then a cold voice. I'm your mother. I have the right to come to my son's house whenever I want. To say what I want. To do what I think is necessary. No, you don't. James spoke slowly, clearly. Listen carefully because I won't repeat myself. You humiliated my wife. In my house. In front of guests. You called her a housekeeper. That is unacceptable. I demand a public apology. Margaret snorted. An apology? For telling the truth? I only said what everyone thinks. It doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what you said. And until you apologize sincerely, Without excuses, without buts, you will not set foot in this house. And you will not see your granddaughter, Lily. She grabbed the only thing that could hurt her. You can't forbid me from seeing my granddaughter. I can. And I do. Until you apologize to her mother. You're crazy. She's brainwashed you. That woman is destroying our family. That woman is my wife. Her name is Emily. And she's not destroying the family. You are. For years. First with Dad, now with me. But I've had enough. Margaret gasped. How dare you talk about your father? You don't know anything. I do. Dad told me before he died. Everything. About the control, the humiliation, the manipulation, about how you killed every desire he had to be himself. I won't let you do the same to me. Hang up. James didn't listen. Call me when you're ready to apologize. Until then, don't call. Don't come. Don't try to contact me through relatives. I'm serious, Mom. This is the line. Either you respect it or you lose me. I raised you. I gave you the best years of my life. James hung up, in the middle of a sentence. He just pressed the red button and put the phone down on the table. He exhaled. His hands were shaking. I went over and hugged him. You did it. I know. But it was hard. I know. For the next 3 days, the phone rang constantly. Aunt Susan, Uncle Robert, cousins, family friends. Everyone wanted to talk, to persuade, to reconcile. James responded to everyone in the same way. I've made my decision. It's not up for discussion. If you want to support Mom, that's your right. But it won't change my decision. Some understood. Some took offense. Some tried to pressure him. James was unshakable. He blocked those who crossed the line. He politely but firmly said goodbye to those who sided with his mother. For the first time in years, he didn't try to please everyone. He just did what he thought was right. Lily asked about her grandmother on the 3rd day. Will she call? I don't know, sweetie. Maybe. Maybe not. I'll miss her. I understand. Me too. But sometimes you have to do difficult things to protect those you love. She climbed onto my lap. She hugged me. I love you, Mom. You're the best. I held her close, burying my nose in her hair. It smelled of children's shampoo and happiness. I love you too, sweetie. More than anything in the world. The letter arrived 3 months later. I recognized the handwriting immediately, the same one that had once signed greeting cards. Inside were 4 words. I was wrong. We lived without Margaret for 3 months. No phone calls, no visits, no tension that always hung in the air when she was around. The house felt different. Quieter, calmer, brighter. James changed. He smiled more often. He hugged me for no reason. He played with Lily in the evenings instead of sitting in his office at the computer. We started talking again. Really talking. Not about bills, school, or weekend plans. About dreams, fears, hopes. One evening we were sitting on the porch. Lily was asleep. The stars were bright. James was holding my hand. I was thinking, he said quietly. Maybe we could go somewhere this summer? The 3 of us. To the sea or the mountains. Just to relax. I looked at him. Before, every trip was discussed with Margaret. She decided when, where, and for how long. She usually joined us, turning the vacation into an ordeal. Now James was suggesting a trip without her. Without asking. Without permission. Just because he wanted to. I'd like that, I replied. Very much. He smiled. Then it settled. I'll start looking at options. Lily was changing too. She became more confident, more open. She laughed more. She drew bright pictures, not dark ones like before. One of them had 3 figures: Mom, Dad, me. We were all holding hands. Above them was a big yellow sun. In the corner was the inscription, My Family. I hung this drawing on the refrigerator. On Wednesday in June, a letter arrived. A white envelope with my address written in Margaret's calligraphic handwriting. I held it in my hands for 5 minutes, not daring to open it. James found me in the kitchen. What is it? A letter from your mother. Shall I open it? Let's do it together. We sat down at the table. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded in half. The handwriting was smooth and neat. No blots, no corrections. She had obviously rewritten it several times. Emily, I was wrong. There is no excuse for my behavior. I humiliated you, controlled you, disrespected you. I said terrible things that hurt you and my granddaughter. I let my fear of losing my son turn into cruelty towards you. It is unforgivable. Forgive me if you can. Margaret, 4 paragraphs, not a word about how hard it is for her. Not a hint that James is wrong. Just an apology. Pure and simple. I reread it 3 times, not believing my eyes. She apologized, I said. Truly. James took the letter and read it. He exhaled. Yes, it seems so. We discussed it further, at length weighing every word. In the end, we decided to meet. But not at home. On neutral ground. At a cafe in the city center. Without Lily until we were sure that Margaret had really changed. The meeting was set for Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. We arrived 5 minutes early. Margaret was already sitting at a table by the window. She had lost weight. She looked older. When she saw us, she stood up but didn't come over. She waited for us to sit down. Thank you for coming, she said. Her voice was quiet, unusually uncertain. I wasn't sure you would agree. We read your letter, James said. Did you mean what you wrote? Margaret nodded. Every word. I've been thinking a lot over the last 3 months. About my life, my marriage, how I raised you, Jamie. And I realized that I made the same mistakes with you that I made with your father. Control, manipulation, inability to let go. She looked at me. Emily, I saw you as a threat. The woman who took my son away. But you didn't take him away. You loved him. You gave him a home, a family, happiness. And I poisoned it all with my presence. Tears welled up in her eyes. She didn't try to hide them. I had to lose you to realize what I was losing. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm not asking you to take everything back to the way it was. I'm just asking for a chance. To try again. Differently. We talked for an hour. Margaret told me about the therapy she went to after we broke up. About what she learned about herself. About her fears, the roots of her behavior. About her own mother, who was exactly the same. A cycle that needed to be broken. I listened and saw that she was trying. Really trying. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't an attempt to regain control. Just a sincere admission of mistakes and a desire to change. We agreed on boundaries. Clear, precise, without ambiguity. Margaret can visit once a week. By prior arrangement. No criticism, no orders, no attempts to control. If she breaks the rules, contact will be cut off again. If she sticks to them, we can gradually expand. She agreed. To everything. No bargaining, no conditions. I understand. It's fair. It's more than I deserve. The first visit was a week later. Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Margaret came with flowers for me and a book for Lily. Lily hid behind me at first. Then she cautiously approached. Hi, Grandma. Hi, sweetie. I missed you. Me too. Dinner was quiet. Margaret didn't criticize the food. She didn't rearrange the furniture. She didn't give unsolicited advice. She just sat, ate, talked about the weather, books, the garden, the usual things. When it was time to leave, she hugged me. Thank you, Emily, for the chance. You're welcome. We'll try. 3 more months passed. Margaret came every Sunday. She kept her distance. She learned to be a grandmother, not a dictator. She learned to respect me, us, our home. It wasn't easy. I saw how she sometimes caught herself wanting to say something familiar, something critical, and she stopped. She rephrased. She tried. Once she even asked, Um, how can I help? Set the table, maybe? Um, not Emily. Um, like James used to call me. It was unexpected, intimate. I nodded. Yes, thank you. You can get the plates. She got them. She put them where I showed her. She didn't rearrange them to suit herself. Now, as I write this, a year has passed. A year since that dinner when James carried his mother out of the house. A year of change, growth, healing. We're not perfect. Margaret still crosses boundaries sometimes. James still has doubts sometimes. I still wake up sometimes with the fear that everything will go back to the way it was. But we try, every day. And that's what matters. I realize that love is not about putting up with things. Love is saying enough when you need to. It's protecting those who are important to you. It's setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when it's hard. On this anniversary, we had dinner together. James booked a table at a restaurant. No guests, no relatives, no drama. Just us. He held my hand across the table and looked into my eyes. Happy anniversary, Em. 9 years, and 90 more to go. I smiled. 90 more. Sounds good. We left the restaurant under a starry sky. We walked down the street holding hands. Our life lay ahead of us. Imperfect, complicated, real. But ours. And that was enough. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. If it resonated with you, if you recognized yourself or someone close to you, remember, you are not alone. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are love for yourself and those you protect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say, enough. Like this story if it touched you. Subscribe if you want to hear more. And remember, you deserve respect. Always. From everyone, especially from your family.